Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I have been looking forward to this conversation with my guest today, Neale. Julie, welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what joy you bring to the world and what you're doing at this point in your life. Loaded question to jump off with, right?
That's such a beautiful question. What joy do you bring to the world? Well, first of all, Jory, I'm really honored to be here and so happy to be in conversation with you. I said just before we officially began that there's nothing I love more than sinking into a deep and meaningful conversation. And I know that that's what you do on your podcast.
Yes.
So this is
and can
joy.
I just add, it is a joy. And I have to say, it's selfishly, I don't think it's a selfish thing. It's part of the reasons why I do the podcast in and of itself is because going into insightful and depth and mindful, connected conversations truly just fills my whole heart. And what a gift to be able to personally engage in these conversations, but then to share the wisdom with our listeners. Like, I just can't think of any better way to want to move through the world than in deep connection and conversation. And so thanks. And you and I have had so many connection points that when we finally connected in real life, it was like, wait, which connection point do we talk about first? Because I think we were just meant to be in each other's lives. So I'm glad that this is a more official kickoff to that.
Yes, I agree. This is the beginning of more to come. Well, I think thank you for that transition, because when you said, what's the joy I bring to the world? I do think that the conversations I've been able to have on my podcast, which is called Mother's Quest, has not only been a gift for me, but to everybody who's listening. And I know that things are, that our conversation has been really aligned when my guest leaves feeling like their cup is full.
Yes.
And that's always my goal, that they leave with some more insight about themselves and their own lives. And I had a really big milestone yesterday, which I know you know about. Mother's Quest turned 5. And it was a 45th birthday present to myself 45 years ago. So that means I turned 50 yesterday. So happy birthday, Julie. I'm so excited that we get to talk right after this big milestone, because I want to hear what this journey has like, not only for you to reach this milestone, but perhaps we just hit the rewind button for a moment of what even led up to you cultivating this baby of yours that you birthed 5 years ago. Yes. So I love the metaphor of planting seeds. Mm-hmm. And I think that, what I have realized more and more is that we're planting seeds all the time for the things that we harvest later. So the journey to creating Mother's Quest was lifelong. And in particular, through my motherhood journey, which began almost 18 years ago, because my oldest is going to be 18 in March.
Blink of an eye, right?
Yeah. So
my oldest just turned 18 last week, and it literally, like, I know it's a cliche, but how did that happen just so fast?
It is so true. Yeah. That expression that like the days are long, but the
years are short.
So true. So I came from a career in youth development and community building. I was always very committed to supporting children and young people. And for a long time was in fundraising and donor development and program development. And I had the privilege of working for a youth organization called Alternatives in Action, which believed that the adults who are working with young people need to be modeling and living the principles that we were trying to instill in the youth that we were working with. And so we had a practice called adult reflection, where the staff would come together. At one point, it was every Friday for 3 hours, and that eventually changed. But it was an opportunity to do what I do on the podcast a lot now, which is to literally press pause, to slow down, to get present with what's happening with us and our own growth and development and our relationship with one another as coworkers. And that experience is a place where I felt like I came alive, and eventually led me to find coaching and to really focus on being a coach and a facilitator. And so I had this one track of my life where I was holding space for other people, particularly adults who were supporting children and youth. And then I was on a motherhood quest, and first had trouble getting pregnant with my oldest. And then early on, by the time he was 18 months old, we realized that he was not developing like his typical peers. And so early on in my motherhood journey, it was a lot about advocacy and putting supports in place. And then I had 5.5 years of infertility between my oldest and my youngest, Jacob, who's now 9. And so what happened to me, which I know is true for a lot of moms, is I felt like I had lost myself in motherhood in many ways.
We just pause on that for a moment and give that just some real compassionate space. So many women lose themselves in the journey. And that's not to say it's not a fulfilling, heart-filled, wonderful journey. It's an and.
Absolutely. Because in the same way that I lost parts of myself, I also found parts of myself that I never knew existed. And so I think then there's this idea emerging for me. The 2 words mother's quest were with me for the entire time of my motherhood journey. And this idea started to bubble up about how could I somehow bring together these 2 worlds, my own transformative journey and my own yearning and desire for living a fuller life that was anchored in motherhood, but was also beyond motherhood. And these skills that I had and this love that I had for facilitation and coaching and holding space for other people and building community and connections. And so this vision for Mother's Quest as a community and as coaching programs and really a vibrant ecosystem for mothers who are on a quest to live an epic life. And I didn't have the language for that back then, but now I do. That was a dream I had. And it was a dream that I really sat on for a long time. And then I had a spiritual experience one day when 2 birds got trapped in my house. So we could tell that story another time, or we could direct people to my intro episode or the book, because I tell it there. But the long and the short of it is that day became what I call a spark moment. And because I paused and made meaning of what happened, I put a stake in the ground and just said, I'm no longer going to wait. I'm committed to this and I'm going to make it happen now. And I started down the path. And that was now almost 6 years ago. But because of that commitment that day, I launched Mother's Quest on my 45th birthday, December 1st, and committed to a 12-episode season and did not know necessarily what would happen after that. But it has truly been a labor of love and a key part of how I live my life. It has impacted my children and the people around me. And I know it has brought a lot of joy and impact to my guests, to my community members, to my coaching clients. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity I think what we're capable of doing now and the way that we can reach for our dreams and reach other people is unusual. And I never take it for granted.
100%. And there's so much there in your journey. And thank you so much for sharing it, because I know for so many people hearing in any part of reflection of their own journeys to feel like I'm not alone, right? That someone else has understood, even if the details are different, the emotion is the same, of whether it's I've lost part of myself, or I found part of myself, or I don't know what's next, but I know it's in there inside of me, or you've got this synthesis of your personal and professional life melding together into one life purpose, right? I mean, there's so much in there. I have a couple of questions I want to go back to before we get to the real present moment, because this is where I find, in my own journey, and with so many of the clients that I work with, I want to normalize the piece of ourselves that gets lost in motherhood. Can you speak a little bit to that? And then I also want to then flip to that to say, what did you find with yourself? And obviously that was so much of what you created, but I want to normalize, because a lot of moms that I work with feel really guilty for saying that.
Mm.
or don't know how to give space for the and. I love this, and I don't know who I am right now. Right. So,
Yes.
can you share a little bit about that?
So I think it can be so easy to be consumed by your role as mother,
Yeah.
by all the emotion that you expend as a mother. And then if you are a mom who has had any kind of additional challenges, I mean, let's face it, first of all, being a mom is challenging, period. But then if you have a child who has any extra needs or additional challenges on that journey, it is really hard to make space for yourself, for your relationships, for your own growth, for your impact in the world. And that is what happened. I think, just with so much focus on first my older child and supporting him and his needs, and then just trying to get pregnant with the second, it was hard to claim space for anything else. At the same time, you asked, like, what are the things I gained? I think there was a resilience and an unending, unconditional love.
Yeah.
And also courage to sit in the tension of the unknown.
Oh God, isn't that just like the practice that we all need to practice all the time, to say, how do I be okay when I'm not okay?
Yeah. And to release attachment.
Yeah. One of the things that, is the focus of my work is mindfulness. And, at the root of it, to me, there's a lot of root answers to what does it mean to be mindful. But one of the big keys for me is the practice of acceptance, right? If I'm not striving or clinging or attaching to what not is, how can I accept what is? And people will always say to me, but Joy, how do I accept what I don't like? Well, not accepting it doesn't make it go away. It only makes our reaction to it bigger. And so that space that you just named, that's a deep, deep work, a lifelong work.
Lifelong work. And I have a story, if it's okay to share.
Please.
What you just named made me think of. I have big transformative moments around milestone birthdays. That's clear. On my 40th birthday, I hired a coach to take me and some of my other friends who were also turning 40 on a milestone hike. And that experience has actually become the template now of something I do twice a year for the Mother's Quest community virtually, using the hike as a metaphor. But we went on an actual hike with this incredible view of the ocean. And as we were ascending, we were asked to reflect on sort of where we had come, what was the chapter that we were closing. And when we were at the top, looking out at this expansive view of the water, we were prompted to think about, what do we want to let go of? What's no longer serving us? And at that point, we had started, we had our first round of IVF. It had been now at least 5 years since we were trying to get pregnant. The first round of IVF did not work. And I continued to hold this vision that my family was not complete. And standing there looking out at the ocean, I knew that I had to let go of that. And I was able to name in front of my friends and this person that was leading us that I wanted to truly believe that we were complete and whole as we were. And instead of having this vision of our family unit with this like gaping hole with this child we were trying to bring together, I changed my mental image to a picture of the three of us with our arms around each other.
Oh, Julia, it's so beautiful.
I know. I'm crying, of course. And trusted that if it was, for the best for all of us, that we would be able to open our arms and welcome another child in. And of course, I'll never know for sure, but the next round of IVF, which I think we started a few days after that hike, is when we conceived Jacob, and started to bring him into our world. So that story has stayed with me for a long time. About
in my spiritual view of the world and my woo-woo-ness, I think there's a clear connection point there, because it's releasing the grip.
Yes.
And in that releasing, we can soften in. And I think that's where our true growth resides. It's interesting and it's a question I ask all the time. And I've come to have a secondary piece to the question, because I think it's fundamental to the work that I do is what do you need to let go of, right? But the secondary piece that I've begun to incorporate is, in order to let go of it, can you consider how at one point it may have served you? Because once you recognize that at one point, this belief, this narrative, this practice, whatever it may be that you're holding on to, at one point it served you, and now it's no longer serving you. The conditions are no longer present in which it continues to serve you. Because at one point, that belief that your family was not complete is what kept you to be persistent and resilient and continuing to work towards through IVF. Right. So it served you at one point. Yes. And then that point came in which I don't have to strive so hard. I can release into what is.
Absolutely.
So it's a beautiful kind of reframe, because I think it helps us go, oh yeah, I can see why I was holding on so tightly to that. And I can see perhaps now why it's not working for me to continue to hold so tightly.
Yeah, it no longer serves you. I use that language too, and I find it to be so powerful. And I also think like we're here to learn our lessons along the way in our journey. And, maybe that was a key lesson I needed to learn before we could move forward. And it's certainly something that I've brought back into my coaching, and it's a story I've shared with other people so that it might be helpful to other people.
Yeah. So in your quest, when I think of quest, there's a couple of different words that come to my mind when I think of a quest. What did quest mean to you when you said those words were with me all along?
Well, I think quest has this connotation of being on an adventure, on a powerful journey. And
it's like that hero's journey, right?
The hero's journey. And that idea of us stepping into becoming the hero of our journey and the author of our story is at the core of Mother's Quest. So yeah, I mean, motherhood didn't come easy for me.
Yeah.
At any turn. And so there was a striving, and, I think as a person, I'm a seeker in so many ways. I think I'm always wanting to learn. I'm always seeking deeper understanding of what's bigger than me, and why are we really, the big questions, the spiritual questions. So quest just, you know how you're just drawn to certain words?
Yes.
I think that word just was like a magnet for me. It just was something I felt like, yes, this word reflects how I feel like I live my life.
Yeah. It's aligned for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so within the Mother's Quest community, can you share more of what you do in that community? That I know you've created such a vibrant community, and what is, the skills that you're hoping to bring to some of these other women? Like, what's the coaching aspect versus just what is the community oriented aspect of what you've created?
Thank you for asking that. This question feels especially powerful for me because, on the 5-year milestone yesterday, I created this opportunity to celebrate all the aspects of Mother's Quest and what we've accomplished together in this time. And so I invited clients and podcast guests and, just so many people that have been an integral part to come and share what they've appreciated or, how Mother's Quest has impacted them. And then also wishes or blessings for the community. And it was just astounding to listen and to witness all of these different ways that the community has impacted people. So there is a Facebook group, and one of my greatest joys is to know who resides in that group, because I'm the person that, admits them and invites people in.
Yes.
And I know, just what incredible change-making women and mothers are there. And, I know I can tag someone in when somebody has a question, and I know that there's somebody there that has a resource. So, even though it's something as seemingly trivial as a Facebook group, there are such powerful
believe me, that's
things.
Not trivial at all. It's not seemingly. It's a real community in a virtual space. That is a real life living system you've created.
Yes. So that is very deep, and that community lives outside of the Facebook group sometimes. So for instance, I recently interviewed Julie Lithcott-Hames alongside my son, Ryan, for a conversation about how to be an adult, because she just published her second book in that series, now called How to Be an Adult. And I get to host
an interview with her in a couple of weeks. So I'm excited for that. Yes.
I'm thrilled for you, because she is one of my most favorite people and favorite guests. I've now had her on my podcast twice. But I get to host her in my home for brunch and do a live Q&A, and people can come and get a book signed. I'd love for you to come if you would be interested.
That would be so fun.
And so, sometimes
I know you and I have the benefit of being, we get live somewhat close together. So we get to have some of those real life in-person opportunities.
Yes, I'm excited about that. So, sometimes it lives beyond the computer screen. I created something called the Mother's Quest Circle, which is a 4-session coaching series that is meant to spark your epic life when you feel like you're on the threshold of a new chapter. And in some cases, those circles have also just lived far beyond our time together. In fact, one of the amazing shares yesterday were from some members of my very first virtual circle from 2018. And there are 5 of us there that have stayed so connected that we talk almost daily on Voxer. And we've just been through almost everything you can imagine in our lives together. I also do that experience in one-on-one coaching. I do these milestone hike experiences, sometimes in person, and then I do it as a group virtually twice a year. Once in February, because I say February is the new January, to welcome in the new calendar year. And then once in September, around the Jewish New Year and the academic start of the year, which is a new beginning for so many mothers.
Often feels like a new year more so than January.
It does. And then I'm now an author. I wrote my first tiny book through the Tiny Book course.
Yes. And I wanted to ask about that. And I thank you for sending me a copy. And I've been able to thumb through some of it. I'd be honest, I have not gotten through all of it, but what I've been able to receive is the first thing that struck me with it, Julie, was your heart in it is so present. And I think that's one of those connection points that helps you be such a beautiful integrator of community, is when you show your heart, and how it, that honesty and that vulnerability is such a place of authentic connection. And I just wanted to share with you that even just from the very first few pages that came through. So thank you for sharing that piece of you. But you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I've written down, okay, I want to go back and ask this about her specifically, because I know it's written out in the book, and there's a really cute photo of it too. When you say spark your epic life, I know that EPIC is really an acronym for more. So can we talk a little bit about what that means to you, and then describe what the epic life looks like?
Yes, thank you for asking that. So first and foremost, epic is a metaphor for some of the things we were talking about before, about being the hero of our journey, being on a quest, living a life that's filled with the things that matter most to us. Yeah. And I often say I have this image of so that someday when we're sitting on a porch with our grandchildren, we can tell them the stories of all the things we did, the ways that we've made a difference, and the challenges that we faced, but the ways that we continue to persevere through them. So EPIC, first of all, is that metaphor. And then it is also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us live that kind of a life, especially when we're raising our children. And it has become a guiding framework that I use in all my podcast interviews, that obviously shows up in the book. Right now, we're getting ready to press send on the first Mother's Quest planner.
So fantastic. That's exciting.
So exciting. So that we can actually plan our months and our days using the EPIC guideposts to set intentions. And it stands for E, engaged mindfully with our children. P is about our passionate and purposeful impact in the world beyond our family. I stands for invested in ourselves. And then C is connected to a strong support network, so that we realize we do not need to be alone on the journey.
It's such a beautiful framework for everything.
It's so holistic, which is what I really appreciate about it. And of course, there's always a guidepost that we may feel like we're not paying as much attention to. But I think those 4 elements of our life when we're raising our kids are core things that really do matter and really do demand us to pay attention to them.
So there's one that jumps out that I want to chat about, because you and I are in a similar stage of our motherhood journey on this. And it's the first one, that engage mindfully with our kids. And mindful parenting work is one of the deep passions of the work that I do. And since even before I was pregnant, I took this role of motherhood so seriously. And I know that all mothers do. And I'm not trying to be hierarchical in that. It was a true intention of presence that I brought even to my pregnancies, of wanting to create a space in which I could foster growth that was not about me or about my stuff or my story, but I could authentically create this for my children. And I've got 2 daughters. Like I said, my oldest just turned 18, and then I've got a almost 16-year-old. So you and I are at this cusp of launching these children. And so fascinating to begin to observe the practice of parenthood as it shifts at our child's different life stages. And the engaged mindfully is going to look different if you've got an infant, a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, an 18-year-old, whatever it is. And so how are you planning on prepping for this engaged, mindful presence as you begin to launch a child in which way that looks, right?
Yeah. Well, I do think that the ability to separate yourself from your child and to release expectation and remember that this is their journey and not yours is something that has required mindfulness all along. So it does change depending on the stage that your children are in. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I have found that is something I have to continually remind myself about with both children. And that I think shows up a little bit differently for mothers, maybe because, very often we are the primary caregiver. It seems to be a little bit easier, at least for my husband, to sometimes give himself some distance. And I can get enmeshed and have to stop and pause and say, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is not for me to figure out. This is for him to figure out. And when I can create space, when I can sometimes put like my coach or facilitator hat on and ask him empowering questions and help my teenager find his own way, it goes so much better, obviously, than like telling him what he should do. But it is hard when they're facing so many key decisions and so many challenging experiences as they're navigating adolescence and high school life. And then my teenager is differently wired. And so there's another whole layer there in terms of where he is and what he's able to hold. And one of the practices that I talk about in the Mother's Quest Inspiration Guide is step up, step back. Mm-hmm. And so navigating that, about figuring out there are times when our kids do need us to step in more, do need more scaffolding, do need us to connect them to a resource. And sometimes they really need us to just back off.
Yes.
back off.
I love that you named that part, because it feels scary when we step back. And oh my God, there's so much that I want to share on that. But for sake of time for the podcast, what I want to be able to kind of bring it back to is, I know you mentioned earlier, and I obviously know this about you, we're both Jewish. And I remember with my daughter, when she became a bat mitzvah at 13, that was my true first experience of stepping back and really recognizing it's my job to allow her the space to emerge in the way that she's going to emerge, that this isn't a vision of what I have for her, but an opportunity for her to create herself in this process, which is entirely what this, age defining moment is all about. And I wish that there was an overarching milestone for all teenagers to practice that first step into adulthood. And yes, 13 is quite young, but it's also, we are capable in different ways for each child. but just how hard it is to say, this isn't about me. This is about me creating the container to allow what's supposed to emerge. And I'm grateful for having that opportunity at 13, because I think it's prepared me as a mom at these different life stages of getting her license and turning 18 and college applications, because it's a process of disenmeshment that doesn't feel not supportive. It's 100% supportive, but it's not based on my intentions for her. It's about supporting her intentions. And, it's fascinating how even husband and wife, or in my case, ex-husband, and like where that shows up of our vision of our kids versus supporting what that vision is wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
Even if it's outside of our own vision.
Yeah. And I think, college application time is a really powerful opportunity for that. There have been lots of moments where, we've kind of taken a step back and said, wait a minute, like, is this really something you want? Like, we don't need to force this, or maybe not so many applications, like some of these schools, just really pressing pause, because you can just find yourself now rolling down this path that you're not sure you need to be on. And we've often, Chris, my husband, and I have definitely like checked our own selves about like, is this something that Ryan wants or that we want?
Yeah.
And how can we actually let him know and make that transparent? You don't at any point, this is your choice.
And that's the next piece I was going to say was we can feel it internally, but communicating it accurately, that's sometimes the hardest challenge. So you and I had a short exchange the other day, and I was responding to a question of, what does turning 5 mean? And you were in reference to this 5th anniversary or birthday celebration of Mother's Quest. And I wanted to share this little story with you, because I think you'll find a lot of relevance, especially in what we were just naming about these different stages of motherhood. But when my oldest daughter was turning 5, I, in my mind, had all of these visions of what was going to change now that she was a quote, big 5-year-old girl. And I kept talking about it really excitedly. When you're going to be a big 5-year-old girl, you're going to be a big 5-year-old girl. And in my mind, I knew exactly what that meant. It meant she was going to have some more responsibilities. She was going to have to start making her bed in the morning and wash her face on her own and put her pajamas away and get herself. It was just a milestone of what she was capable of. But she came to me, Julie, one day crying and said, but mommy, I don't know what it means to be a big 5-year-old girl. And my heart just broke. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this expectation on a milestone that actually means nothing in her own context. And so as, in talking about these different milestones we engage in, they feel big, but yet in absence of naming an intention for what it means for us or for others, it can get lost or feel really overwhelming. And just as she was turning 18, about 2 nights before, I was tucking her in bed, which I still do every night. And she started crying. And she goes, Mommy, I don't know what it means to be a big 18-year-old girl. And again, my heart just, broke a little bit in her honesty around growing up is so overwhelming. It's so hard. And not just the college applications and, but I don't know what it means to be an adult, and I want to be a little girl and I want to go off to the world, but I also want to stay home. And just that paradox of the push and pull. And what is my role as mom to facilitate these different life stages without attaching what it means to me to be a big 18-year-old girl, but to really say, Ari, what does it mean to you to be a big 18-year-old girl? This isn't about me or my vision or my, experience.
God, that's so beautiful and so amazing that your daughter feels like she can come to you, that she had the introspection at age 5 to realize she was feeling that inner tension and to bring it to you, and that she's doing it again now. It was one of the most
heartbreaking moments of my motherhood. I'll tell you, it reminded me, be really clear in my communication, because otherwise the expectations are scary for kids.
Yes. And also, though, it provided that beautiful opportunity for you to have a conversation with her then and have the conversation now. I think that, when we can just slow ourselves down in those moments. Like it's also easy to roll right past something like that.
Right.
But when we're being mindful and allow ourselves to get present, then we can see what a gift an opportunity like that is, even if it might feel a little bit painful or you might have some regret or feel like you should have done something
Yeah.
differently. It's just an opportunity for learning for both of you.
Yeah. And you said something earlier that reminded me, that idea of, I remember years ago taking the phrase out of my language in my parenting of, what you should do is, I don't know what anybody should do, but I can get curious. What would you like to do in this moment? So even as you're referring to your son with these colleges of, you don't have to do any of this. What feels good to you? Let's get intentional about your way through the world.
Exactly. Yes. And I'm hoping you could edit this out because you just said something else that made me think of something, but now I can't remember what it was, which happens to me a lot now.
Well, I was going to say, you know what? I'm not editing it out because that's the real life of motherhood too. Like this is the real life experience of, I had something really good and then where did it go?
You said something that made me think of something. Okay, give me just a moment. What were you just talking about? You were saying
taking out the word should. Was that it? No.
Okay. You said, what do you really want? Oh, okay. I thought of it. I also think that sometimes it's okay to say what we think, but what I've learned to do when I can be present again is to ask my son if he's interested or if he's ready for it, if it would be helpful to him. So lately I have been better about saying, well, I have some thoughts about that. Are you open to hearing? And I just find his willingness to hear what I have to say is so dramatically different if I ask for some permission or if I get curious about whether that will be of value to him. And sometimes he's like, no, not now.
That's an honest response. And I'm so glad that you brought that up because over the years in my therapy practice, obviously I work with a lot of moms, but I've also worked with a good handful of teens. And at some points have worked with mother and child. So I really hear both sides of the situation. And when parents offer their own life experience or perspective in an effort to be a solution to their child's problems, it rarely goes over in the way the parent is intending.
Yeah.
Because it makes the child feel unseen in their own experience. So I just want to validate 100% that when you can give curiosity, would it be helpful if you either heard what I felt about this? Would it be supportive to you if I shared with you how I went through a similar challenge when I was your age? Because in absence of that pause to ask that question, it feels steamrolled over their experience and now it's about yours.
Yes.
I love that you named that. So what is your hope of what it means for Mother's Quest to be a big 5-year-old girl now?
It's so sweet. So I posed the question, which you saw, asking like, tell me, parents and other people, tell me about being 5. And Lena Velasquez, who is an amazing Mother's Quest member, and she was the MC of our celebration yesterday. She was also a high school student when I worked at Alternatives in Action all those years ago. So I've watched her go from young person to parent. She responded immediately and said, 5 is like a whole hand.
And I saw that response actually.
And I feel like that's a metaphor. She said so much foundational work happens in those first 5 years. So I was able to see and take in and celebrate yesterday what a foundation has been built in these first 5 years and how much connection and inspiration and frameworks and thought leadership there is now. And I know that I want to do more. So I have planning on submitting paperwork to create a Mother's Quest Foundation, because a lot of what we've done over the last 5 years is to raise money and give to social justice causes, often tied to an episode. And I think that I would actually be able to bring in those funds more easily if there's a tax deductible side on the Mother's Quest front.
Sure.
So that I'd love to do a venture fund and at some point be able to invest money in mothers' ideas, because I think they're so close to the solution to so many of our challenges.
So it's a practice of, go ahead.
Oh, like names come to me. I've had the name Mother's Quest Incubator with me for years, and actually have a business card with it printed on there, but it doesn't live in form yet. So I know in this next chapter, I'm going to create the incubator, which is a space where we can be in more dynamic relationship with one another as we're all trying to bring forward these ideas that we have for change, for podcasts, for books, for organizations, for businesses. So I have a lot that's brewing in my heart for Mother's Quest, and I feel really good about the solid foundation that we've built so far.
Absolutely. I was going to say it's that beautiful and hard mix of setting intentions and then releasing what's going to be.
Yes.
So, Julie, how can people find you? What's the best way for them to connect? I know you've shared so much beautiful wisdom, but there's so much more in your book and in your communities and in your podcast. So what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Thank you for asking that. Well, there are three things that come immediately to mind. Number one, I'd be so honored if anyone who feels called would subscribe to the Mother's Quest podcast and listen to the episodes. 00 is the origin story. And so you can find out more about those two birds that got trapped in my house and how that became a spark. But there's so many other powerful episodes. I would say the website, mothersquest.com, is a great hub for everything. The Facebook group, you can find if you just put Mother's Quest in the search, and I would love to welcome you in there. And then I guess I would say the book would be another wonderful entry point.
We'll have all these links in the show notes as well.
Wonderful. So, and you can find that at mothersquest.com/inspiration guide.
Oh, Julie, I'm so pleased to be connected with you. And I am looking forward to watching whatever is supposed to unfold. And I know that it is, like you said, you've set a beautiful foundation. All the tools are there. And knowing the amount of women that you have not only connected with, but are serving is just what continues to drive it forward. So beautiful accomplishment. Happy birthday to both Mother's Quest being 5 and to you turning amazing 50 and just being the beautiful soul that you are. So I'm so glad to know you and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Joy, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled we're connected. I know there's a lot more to come, and I truly appreciate this opportunity to be in conversation with you at this milestone mark so that I can make meaning of it.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, everyone. I will have all those links for Julie in the show notes, and take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.